And we begin tonight with the huge and sobering stakes facing America and Vice President Kamala Harris as she prepares to debate Donald Trump. Late this afternoon, Harris landed in Philadelphia, site of the debate, but she had been in Pittsburgh since Thursday preparing for the big event. Meanwhile, Trump has been, golfing and posting insane threats on his failing Truth Social, and now back on Twitter. Yay! And I say huge stakes for Harris because, if we're being honest, Trump faces almost no stakes. Tomorrow night's debate will matter much more for Harris than for him. Not only do polls show that more than 90% of Americans have made up their minds about Trump versus just over 70% who have formed firm opinions of Vice President Harris. Because we are now past Labor Day and many voters are just now paying attention, Harris will essentially be reintroducing herself to potentially the largest audience ever to watch a presidential debate. And anyone who's been paying attention to the mainstream media understands that Trump and Harris are going to be judged on two very different scales tomorrow night. Legacy media organizations, including the country's largest newspapers, which, according to Media Matters, covered 82-year-old President Joe Biden's age and cognitive acuity 10 times more than they have 78-year-old Donald Trump's age and clearly declining mentals, are going to judge VP Harris much more harshly than they judged Trump, regardless of the outcome tomorrow night. That is just a sad but true fact. Her performance essentially has to be perfect. And even if it is, she's going to be picked apart. Every word, every syllable, every comma, what she wears, how she answers the questions. While Trump, even if he rambles incoherently and lies for 90 straight minutes about tariffs being paid by anyone other than American consumers or about Hannibal Lecter, his answers are sure to be sane-washed by much of the media immediately after the debate and in the days to come to ensure that he continues to be taken seriously by American voters and that this race remains a dead heat right up until Election Day. It is unfair, to be sure. But that's the way the media operates when it comes to Democrats versus Republicans. It has been that way the whole time I've been paying attention to and covering politics. It was that way for Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton versus George W. Bush and George Herbert Walker Bush and Ronald Reagan and Trump. In fact, let me take you back to 2016, when Hillary Clinton thoroughly trounced Donald Trump in all three debates that election season.
She doesn't have the look. She doesn't have the stamina. I said she doesn't have the stamina.
He tried to switch from looks to stamina. But this is a man who has called women pigs, slobs, and dogs, and someone who has said pregnancy is an inconvenience to employers. Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit that the Russians have engaged in cyber attacks against the United States of America, that you encouraged espionage against our people, that you are willing to spout the Putin line, sign up for his wish list, break up NATO, do whatever he wants to do.
The public, anyone with eyes and ears, clearly thought that she won. Hillary won. But the media made a choice to focus instead on her emails, her husband, her likability. And we all know how that race turned out. Which brings me to the second reason we need to be soberly serious about what happens in the next 56 days. The structure of American elections favors Republican presidential candidates, period. The Electoral College is tilted in Republicans' favor because of how many electoral votes are allocated to low-population rural states. That means Republicans don't actually need to win the popular vote in order to enter the White House. They only need to win key states by incremental margins to tip the Electoral College their way. That's how Al Gore wins the popular vote by 540,000 and does not become president. It's how Hillary Clinton, who didn't just beat Donald Trump in the debates, she also beat him in the popular vote by 3 million votes, did not become president. With the results being a 6-3 right-wing Supreme Court and the end of Roe v. Wade and affirmative action. More than 1,000 migrant children still separated from their parents, the unleashing of hate and division that still has some American families divided, an attempted coup, plus 1 million Americans dead from COVID. The popular vote, meanwhile, is tilted the other way because Democrats tend to win large majorities of every group except white Americans, who, despite demographic changes, are still 60% of the electorate and consistently vote 60-40 in Republicans' favor. As long as Republicans hold that 60%, they frankly don't need majorities of anyone else. The last time Republicans won the popular vote, it was George W. Bush in his 2004 reelect, and he got just 50.7% of the popular vote. All of that may give you some insight into Donald Trump and J.D. Vance's strategy and why they don't really seem to be campaigning very much. And when they do bother to hold rallies, they seem to do them in sundown towns, small towns with a history of making it known to black and other non-white folks that they'd better be gone by the time the streetlights come on, as the great Ayman Mohyeldin pointed out this weekend.
Showing up at these towns is not the problem, but showing up at them when your stump speech includes lines about how some human beings are vermin, about the need to confront hordes of immigrants, about the need to crack down on crime in majority black cities, this is a problem. When your slogan is the nostalgic phrase, "Make America Great Again," a campaign tour of sundown towns helps us all understand the America Donald Trump is yearning for.
I mean, if all you need is to root out more and more white voters, you might do that sort of thing. And you might drone on about migrant crime that isn't actually an epidemic. And you might push to ban books about black and queer folks, all to keep that one vote you need on your side. That also might explain why Trump continues to unleash unhinged social media posts threatening to jail his political opponents, and why he continues to lie about the 2020 election, even though he has admitted twice just in the last week that he did, in fact, lose to Joe Biden. White Christians tend to be more open to believing that non-white voters are stealing elections for Democrats. Donald Trump isn't trying to win more voters, guys. He's just trying to convince the voters he already has to not allow a non-white woman to become president, while picking off some minority voters who might be open to a campaign message that's anti-immigrant, anti-woman, and pro-billionaire as well. And that strategy appears to be working, if you look at the polls, which remain essentially tied. And as a backup, he's counting on his big lie and embedded officials in key states who believe the big lie to simply refuse to certify the election in their states due to claims of so-called fraud by non-white voters, throwing the election to the Republican-led House Representatives or to John Roberts and the right-wing Supreme Court majority, both of which would absolutely name Trump as the winner, regardless of the popular vote. In other words, all the joy and the possibility represented by the Harris-Walz campaign isn't translating into some landslide victory for the fresh-faced candidate, despite how hopeful and refreshing it would be to live in a world where the American president is a badass woman who actually laughs and can talk to regular people and to kids, whose running mate is a decent, normal ex-teacher and football coach who actually cares that children not be hungry, and who would end once and for all America's miserable experiment with ugly, cruel, bizarre, and fascistic Trumpism and prevent Project 2025 with its threats of mass deportations and concentration camps for non-white migrants, a national abortion ban, and, quote, unleashing the police and the U.S. military on urban communities and protesters. Despite how exhausting and deadly the Trump era was and how it devastated our lives, our psyches, our families, our economy, tens of millions of Americans, our fellow Americans, want to go back to that era. They do not want to move on. They want to go back. It makes no sense to me, and probably not to you either, but that is reality. Electing a woman president, let alone a non-white woman president, is going to be a fight, y'all, a huge fight. And that debate tomorrow night is a critical round in that fight. Kamala Harris has to nail it. She has to beat Donald Trump like he stole something. But beating him will not be enough, because he's going to be graded on a curve. And when the debate is over, Democrats, independents, and pro-democracy Republicans are going to have to find and turn out every single voter they can in order to put Trumpism where it belongs, in the dustbin of history.